At the risk of sounding like a broken record, I'm going to say it anyway. It really is astounding how the pandemic created a springboard for life pivots and self-exploration. I mean, seriously. And while the pandemic was a very difficult time for humankind, the creativity and innovation that period of time manifested doesn't just go away. In fact, I'm seeing it more and more in the amazing midlife women who are on this podcast and others. Our guest today is no exception. Her travels around the country allowed her to capture the true essence of not only the impact of the pandemic, but also the spirit of the American people. I couldn't have been more impressed with her boundless energy, bravery, and resiliency. Health, wellness, career, relationships, and everything in between. We're removing the taboo from what really matters in midlife. I'm your host, Michelle Fishburne, and this is Asking for a Friend. Welcome to the show, everyone. Our guest today is a full-time digital nomad, splitting her time between her 2006 motorhome, Airbnbs, and the occasional house-sitting gig. And like many of the guests on the podcast, the pandemic led her down a path of adventure and self-discovery. Welcome to the show, Michelle Fishburne, otherwise known as the Happy Nomad and the author of the wonderful book, Who We Are Now. Welcome to the show, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm really happy to be here.
And I'm really happy to have you here. I know you're super busy traveling around the country, but first I saw that you got a really amazing shout out from Forbes.
I did. It was great. Bonnie Marcus wrote this tremendous article about several of us in the book. I mean, I'm in the book. I'm the very last chapter. I was told by UNC Press that I had to be in the book. It's called Who We Are Now, Stories of What Americans Lost and Found During the COVID-19 Pandemic. And I interviewed 100 people. And my story is the last one. But the first story is Gabrielle Fitzgerald, who started off the pandemic like in October 2019 at a simulation of what a novel coronavirus pandemic would be like if it hit the world. I know.
No.
I know. Yes.
My eyes are as big as saucers. I'm going, oh my God.
October 2019.
Wow.
And the reason why she was part of that is that back in 2015, she had done a lot of work in Africa with Ebola. And she doesn't like this boom. I mean, none of us like this boom and bust cycle where we said, okay, we're going to get ready for the next one. And they have all their greatest of intentions for 3 years and then it stops. She'd been trying to get something going called the Pandemic Action Network for years, but nobody was interested in funding it. So she went to this simulation. The book starts with her reaction to that simulation.
Wow.
About how the airline guy came up with a number of what it would do to airlines globally if there were such a pandemic. And when she wrote her piece for LinkedIn or something afterwards, she said she didn't put that number in there because she felt like it would be too embarrassing for him because, of course, the number wouldn't be that high. And, of course, the number was exponentially higher than even the number he used.
Oh, it was. Ugh.
The book starts with Gabrielle. Forbes goes ahead and tracks where she was when this started. And then, of course, she did start the Pandemic Action Network, which has done incredible things already for everybody around the globe. Forbes wanted to champion what she did. And then a woman named Christina Wong, who was an LA comedian whose national tour had just kicked off when COVID started. She was at home as a non-essential worker. And she was devastated and she wanted to do something. So she started making masks on her Hello Kitty sewing machine. And she offered it out to Facebook. And the number of people who wanted masks was huge. And it started growing. And she ended up becoming the organizer of this countrywide volunteer group that's made over 350,000 masks for vulnerable communities. She then turned it into a one-woman off-Broadway show, which got her the Pulitzer Prize finalist for drama recognition. And then several weeks ago, she won the Doris Duke Artist Award, $550,000 in cash, unrestricted, to support her work as an artist. Bonnie wanted to give a shout out to how these women who really did something extraordinary during the pandemic about them. And they're both Christina and Gabrielle are in my book. And I guess she also found extraordinary what I did, which was to jump in a motorhome and drive 12,000 miles all over the United States and interview hundreds of people about their lives during the pandemic. And now it's a book.
First of all, it's a fabulous story, but I do want to back up just a hair, and I want to know a little bit more about you prior to the pandemic. Who you are, who's Michelle Fishburne, where are you from, and what were you doing up until the pandemic?
Well, I was a pretty normal person for the most part up until the pandemic. I grew up in Princeton, New Jersey, in a very traditional family, and I went to UNC Chapel Hill undergrad for political science. Then I went to UVA Law School, and then I worked as an international lawyer in Washington, D.C. for a decade. But then when I had my first kid, I decided I wanted to be not in a city and to stay at home a little while. And staying at home a little while turned into homeschooling. That was my first departure from the normal. I chose homeschooling. A lot of women did not choose homeschooling during the pandemic, but I chose it and did it for well over 10 years. But during that time, my parents were full-time motorhomers. When the school system told me they couldn't meet my kids' needs in the classroom and I should homeschool them, I went ahead and got this motorhome in 2006, and I caravan with my parents for 10 months once and then for 4 months all over the United States, road schooling my children, my 4-year-old and my 7-year-old, and then they were 7 and 9 the second time for 4 months. Jumping in a motorhome and living in it for an extended period of time is not a big deal for me. While some people would say, oh, that was so brave to do that during the pandemic, to me what happened was I was doing public relations for a national nonprofit, and I had these big national events about to happen on the Hill with the Senate and the House. And later in the year, we were just talking to John Legend's people about doing an event. And of course, none of that could happen when the pandemic hit. And it was a nonprofit, so why pay me if I can't do my job?
Correct.
I got laid off, and I thought, that's no big deal. Fine, I'll just get another job. I submitted 86 customized cover letters between March and the middle of July. I had nothing, zero. I even offered my services as a 57-year-old volunteer intern for free, and nobody wanted me. The middle of July, I was like, darn, the lease is coming up on the post-divorce house on July 31st. My youngest is going off to college. I'm divorced. On August 1st, I had no house, no spouse, no job, and no kid to take care of. What I had was my 2006 motorhome and my dog. And that's where it all began.
Were you panicked, or were you in some weird way relieved? You're unloading a lot of old baggage, maybe, at this point?
No, I was totally panicked.
Okay, you were panicked. Okay. I would be.
I had 2 kids in college. I'm responsible for half. College is not cheap these days.
Yeah, no.
We weren't in one of those brackets where we were going to be able to get any kind of financial assistance, but we weren't in a bracket where we didn't need to think about it. No, I was panicked.
You weren't sitting at home doing puzzles and wine night Zoom calls with your friends at this point.
I kept looking for jobs.
Yeah.
On August 1st, I was in Hilton Head with my youngest, and it was a beautiful day, and I was sitting by the water, and my toes were in the water. And I just was like, if I don't live beyond today, that is fine with me.
Oh.
I mean, I wasn't ready to, never thought about, but if I was like, I can see why people are like, yeah, if today's the last day, fine. Because I thought the best part of my life is over. What I have to look forward to is just a job so I can feed myself and put my kids through college and figure out something with retirement. Looked pretty bleak to me. I was like, I'll never be as happy again as I was when I was raising my kids, and it's over, basically.
There were a lot of us that were in your shoes during the pandemic. I lost my job 6 weeks before everything shut down. I think it gave us all some time of reflection that we may not have had before. And you really were overcoming some great challenges at this time. When did you finally say, okay, I've got a plan?
Well, fortunately, that preceded the toes in the water, okay? Even sometimes when you think you've got a plan, doesn't mean that all of your DNA is lined up with it, if that makes any sense.
No, I get it.
On July 15th, I was sitting in a parking lot at Target, and I was thinking, okay, you have to tell the movers where to take your stuff when they come on July 31st. And you got to tell them now. I thought, well, it doesn't make any sense to rent an apartment because I have no idea where I'll have to go in the country to get a job. I mean, if you don't even want me for free, like I'm groveling at this point. And which is so hard to comprehend. A woman with a law degree from UVA, which is like a top 10 law school.
Absolutely.
Groveling, please hire me. I'll work for you for free. And nobody's taking, like, it was mind blowing. Anyway, I'm in the car and I think, okay, I'm going to have to move into the motorhome. Thank God I've got the motorhome. I'll move into the motorhome. Then what? And I thought, well, I could take the motorhome to the beach. But then I realized, well, what am I going to do at the beach? I'm going to wake up every day just as panicked, just as worried, just as scared as I am right now. And if I try to consult my way to a new job, that's what everybody's trying to do. It wasn't working. So why did I think it was going to continue to work? All of a sudden, out of the blue, literally like a lightning bolt, I thought of Humans of New York, which is Brandon Stanton's work, where he photographed thousands of people in New York City and he interviewed them while he did that. And I thought, wait a minute, I'll do Americans of the Pandemic. I'll just drive around in the motorhome and I'll talk to people and ask them about their lives. Now, very naive, because where do you find people in a pandemic? That's a whole nother story. Or maybe one of the questions you might want to ask. But I was like, oh, this is a great idea. I'll do that. And then I'll put together a website and social media. And I'll get some press. And then in December, I'll say to employers, look what I can create out of whole cloth. Hire me. That was the plan. And I was all psyched about it and jazzed about it in the moment when I came up with it. But I didn't know if it was going to work or not. What I've learned is two things. One is that action is the antidote to fear. I learned that phrase from a woman named Rena, who's in charge of a nonprofit in Georgia, when everything went to hell in a handbasket with COVID, and she was figuring out how they were going to do their fundraising. She's like, Michelle, well, of course, action is the antidote to fear. So that was an important message.
Yeah.
And then the other one is, and I didn't realize I did this, but I think this is the key to getting unstuck. My scarcity was I did not have a job. Therefore, I did not have an income. Whenever there's scarcity, there's also abundance. And I didn't understand this until my friend Romy, who I also interviewed for the project, she's on the website, she's a yoga teacher, and she said to me, this is a philosophy in yoga that whenever you have scarcity, there's also maybe an equal or greater amounts of abundance. What I had done in that moment in the car is I had said, my scarcity is I don't have all these things. But I paused and I'm like, but what I do have is da, 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 da. Oh, yeah, I have learned that is such a powerful lesson. And in fact, that's how my father saved the astronauts on Apollo 13 there was.
What?
Yeah. There was scarcity and he used what was in abundance. When the scarcity happens and you are terrified, you have to get super quiet somehow. Look around you and say, what do I have in abundance? And if you need to put it on a whiteboard, put it on a whiteboard. And nothing is too small to consider in your abundance. One of the things I had in abundance was time. It was an uncomfortably large and embarrassing amount of time because I didn't have a job, but I had time. I had curiosity about other people. As a lawyer, I did interviews all the time. I knew how to interview. My parents had taught me how to be a good photographer. I knew about Humans of New York. I knew how to do social media because of my PR background. I had a lot in abundance. And that is the way corporations can find new products, can innovate. Necessity is the mother of invention. Think about that. What that means is necessity means there is something that is scarce, but that is necessary.
I've been smiling ear to ear since you started down this path, this trail. And I'm like, this makes so much sense. If we're just quiet with ourselves, it will help us really think about what it is that we have. You had friends, you had family, there was a lot there. Okay, you're scared shitless. I mean, you're scared.
I was. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Scared and embarrassed and identity.
Whatever, money. Only goes so far.
I thought of myself as an accomplished woman, but I sure as heck didn't feel that way that summer.
And I told you there were some parallels in our story. I will tell you the other piece of the interviewing during the pandemic was I think I was looking at career options that were comfortable but weren't necessarily going to make me happy. You sometimes let desperation drive you to lower your bar a little bit and not really do what is going to light your fire and make you want to get out of bed in the morning as well. I too had to sit back and take some time to really think about what was going to give me career satisfaction. And that took some time. I really appreciate you talking about what got you to the place of the book.
So did you use a whiteboard? Because one of the things I did was I went down to like the local thrift shop and I got this huge whiteboard. There were two inspirations to part of this. One was there was a book called Believe It about a woman who started a cosmetics company. And she was down to like their last $300 when it finally turned around. That book was a little bit of an inspiration. I mean, skimmed it, didn't read the whole thing. And then also Who Moved My Cheese? Because I love that book. It's short. If listeners have never read that book, get it. It's from the 1990s. The message is so important. I'm like, okay. I get on my whiteboard and I put across the top, limitless. And then, without judging, I put whatever it was that my dreams were and things that I thought would make me happy. I just threw them up on the whiteboard in different colors. I didn't erase anything like, oh, that's too silly or whatever. And I just left it there. And over a couple of days, I added some things and I just looked at it. That was really empowering because when you were talking about career satisfaction, and I actually did that back in about March. I knew that all these jobs that I was applying to would not fulfill hardly any of the things I had down that whiteboard. But you're right, I was desperate.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're going, what am I doing? I don't want to go from the fat to the frying pan. Ugh. Anyway, I prayed a lot. I didn't do the whiteboard. I did a lot of praying and a lot of just self-reflection, but maybe I did my whiteboard in my head.
But you did it by praying, Michelle, because what you did was when you prayed, you were deciding and calling out what you really needed.
Yeah, I did. I asked Jesus to take the wheel. Is that a song? I don't know. I don't remember.
Might be. Just might be.
I don't know. Anyway, you decided to write a book, but you had never written a book before. How do you, how does that work?
Well, I didn't actually decide to write a book. I mean, sometimes these things are gradual. I decided I was going to get in the motorhome, I was going to interview these people, put together a website, social media, get some press, and then just offer it up to an employer in December, and then I'd have a job and I'd be done. And I'd have a house again, and I'd have an income. It would be over. That was what I did in the fall of 2020. That was the thought. But then when I was on the road, people are like, this is a book, right? And I said, no. It's just a project. And then, I'm not saying that people shamed me, but they would look at me like, really? This is history you're collecting? You're collecting hundreds of interviews and it's a project? Like, it's not going to go in a book? No. And I didn't really want to sell the book. I said to some friends, look, I am not going to self-publish because I don't want to sell myself or sell a book. I don't mind doing PR for other people. I enjoy that. I don't want to do it for myself. I don't want a book. I don't want to self-publish. And I thought, well, maybe a commercial publisher. And they said, Michelle, if you go to a commercial publisher, if you're not like a name, they don't do any publicity for you as part of your contract. You have to tell them how you're going to sell the book. And then I thought, all right, I'll send one email to UNC Press over Christmas 2020 and ask them if it's a book. And they came back and they said, actually, it is a book. And you know what? We have a 13-person marketing and publicity department, so we'll do everything for you. Huh.
Sounds pretty good.
Sounds pretty good. I banked on that, but what I'm also learning now that I'm in this book selling phase is that they have 100 years of experience in selling academic books. A mainstream book is very different. I'm actually finding myself once again in a place where my cheese has been moved. I need to do scarcity and abundance again. Another step in the learning and reinvention and reconfiguring process.
But remember, you are not starting from scratch. This is not day one. You already have a lot of experience under your belt with the book. You've done social media, which I think you're doing a really great job.
Oh, thanks.
That's how I found you. It's an obstacle. You hit a bump in the road, but this time you're starting from a place of experience, not day one.
I'm also not terrified now because I do have a job. I am a PR director for a global pharmaceutical consulting company. I do have an income. Now, this is what makes my heart sing, what I do with the book and listening to people and my dreams of the second and third and fourth and fifth Who We Are Now books. I have this dream, but it's not like panic because I do have a good job.
Oh, fantastic. That's really good news. I'm thrilled to hear that. I do want to talk a little bit about the book because you had to have heard some stories that moved you beyond belief. Are there any that stand out to you?
In terms of being moved, of course, it's going to be the ones where somebody lost somebody close to them. One gentleman, Jeremy, who was a COVID denier in the beginning, brought it into his home and infected his in-laws, and his father-in-law passed.
Oh.
When I interviewed him, he obviously will never truly forgive himself. I usually didn't find myself in a two-way dialogue with people. I would ask one question at the beginning of the interview, which was, it's January 1st, 2020. What was your 2020 supposed to be like, and what did it end up being like through to the present? And most people would talk for like 30, 40 minutes without breathing, practically. They would tell their whole story, and I wouldn't get involved. At the end of his answer, I just felt compelled to say something I usually didn't. I said, you know, Jeremy, one of the horrible things about COVID is when we got it, we didn't get some like blue dot on our face that says, hey, I've got COVID. If you had had a blue dot on your face, you would not have endangered your family. You need to give yourself some grace. That one was hard. And then a woman who they had lost their 30-something-year-old son. They were in one state and he was in another. And he seemed to be fine, had a little bit of a cold and then missed a softball game or something. And it was like that quick. She talked about this statue called Melancholy, which I then looked up, and it's this statue. It's like a bronze statue, and it's a figure of a mom sitting, but in the middle of it, it's completely empty. It's hollow in the middle. And she said that's how she felt.
Oh.
A handful of people in the book lost loved ones. The people who had financial panic because of their businesses, like restaurant owner in New York City and another restaurant owner in Florida, it was still one of these, things will turn around. I got this. I can keep going. My customers have been there for me. Thank goodness I can do takeout. So there was this sense of, I'm stuck in, as one of the other people I interviewed, Jean, I learned this phrase, liminal space, where you can't go backwards. You can't go forwards. It's just this moment in space-time where you have to live through this, period.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that has propelled the human race is our ability to have pluck, which is a word we hardly ever use.
We don't.
But pluck means spirited and determined courage. I actually think that's one of the reasons why we've evolved as long as we have, or while we're here. Like, when the clan got hit by a saber-toothed tiger and it took out several members of your clan when we were thousands of years ago, You still had to get up the next morning and feed the kids and find water and find shelter and keep going.
Yeah.
We have this ability to use spirited and determined courage even in the most harrowing of circumstances. And that's what I saw.
Don't you think that whether any kind of business owner, I'll use the restaurateur as an example, it's that feeling, or I would say feeling, it's really a skill of innovation. You say, okay, how do I make this work? How do I take this experience of owning this restaurant for how many years? How do I make this work for my customers so I can keep my doors open? And I really think that spirit of innovation is why some people were able to weather this. Now, it wasn't without its challenges, and they certainly weren't making what they had before, but they were still able to employ a few people and feed their families. And that's an amazing thing.
It is, and I think a lot of owners of businesses, when you talk to them, and I didn't really realize this, a lot of them very much value being able to create incomes for their employees so their employees can feed their families and have homes and go on vacations and buy cars. A lot of the people I talked with, they were very much focused on helping keep their employees afloat. And frankly, when you are thinking about other people, you're less panicked yourself. And I think that was one of the great things about, by happenstance, by what I chose to do, is I went ahead and was focused on other people all the time. How am I going to meet them? What are they going to be like? How do I get their interviews? How do I then upload them? I was focused on other people for 12,000 miles, and it helped me not be scared about myself when I was thinking about others.
When you were traveling, Michelle, were there places that you saw that you had never been and you're like, oh, wow, why have I never been here before?
When I've done it before, 10 months and 4 months, it was really to go to national parks and state parks. And this time it was all about our other national treasure, which is our people. I went to lots of tiny towns that I had never been to, like Pine Bluffs, Wyoming. I really don't know how much I processed the places. I was processing the people.
Yeah.
And Shamrock, Texas, and Okmulgee, Oklahoma, and Raton, New Mexico. Those were some of my favorites.
When you look back at these interviews, you think about humanity. Did it give you a sense of, yeah, we've got this?
It very much did. As the reviews for the book start to come in, there was one last night where the woman said something like, done with the shouting, mistrust, and arguing. This book is about the ordinariness of people living their lives. And she said that it was like swanning, which I've never heard, swanning through a new normal social gathering and picking up snippets of people's conversations as you walk through the cocktail party and just hearing about people's lives. She said reading this book will really impact your view of what we went through during the pandemic, because one of the things I have realized is I am the only person in America who did this. My view of the pandemic is much softer. It's much more, I don't know. I just don't think of the pandemic the way anybody else does, because I think you have to read the book to understand why.
Yeah. I told you before, this blows me away that you did this. And I know you said it wasn't really brave because you'd done the nomad thing before and the motorhome and all of that. But I think it took balls to do this. I really do. I mean, I just hope everybody goes out and finds your book, because with all the divisiveness that we have out there, I think this book is one that can really unite people, and we can all find commonality in the breadth of the types of people that you interviewed. And highly, highly recommend. The other thing I really wanted to ask you was, okay, so you have your job now doing PR. What's next for you?
Well, that goes back to the whole scarcity abundance. Some books are on the New York Times bestseller list right from the beginning, and so I could say, oh, well, if it was on there, I'd know what my next path is, perhaps. But it's not. Most books take a while to get into the culture. Patience is not a virtue for me. Well, it is a virtue, but it's something I seem to lack. Now I'm like, okay. Now what? Now I'm looking for a next project. I think the scarcity and abundance message, I think, is something that we really don't talk about in concrete, actionable terms. I think it could help so many people with life challenges. I'm going to start writing and speaking about scarcity and abundance, because if it can save the astronauts on Apollo 13, it can save us all in the workarounds we need to do as we go through life.
Well, it's a great message, and it's something I think maybe all of us can do no matter where we are in life. If you're having a hard time with a family member, something personal, or a career, or you're at a crossroads and maybe you want to do a midlife pivot, or it's probably a great exercise for everybody.
I think it is, because I think sometimes we focus on the scarcity and that's what makes us panicked.
Yeah.
Right now, for example, I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. I homeschooled. And what I did about interviewing people and the simplicity of it, homeschool kids who use what they call the place-based learning approach, or schools that use place-based learning, they would like to know about how I use this technique to gather these stories, because their kids could do it too in their own communities, or with maybe the kids on their soccer team or something, to try to understand team dynamics. Every time I pause and I think, is there any other way to use what I've already started creating? All these other ideas pop up. I just wish I could have 72 hours in every day.
I feel like there's a lot of projects in your head right
there
now.
Are.
Time to get out the whiteboard.
I have several of them now. I'm kind of addicted, so that's a bad thing.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, we all need to go out and get our whiteboard. And then I also want to know where people can find you, Michelle.
The best place to go is to the internet and just type in whowearenow.us. And on there, it tells my story, and it has about, maybe 60, 70 stories on there to get a sense of what the stories are like. And it has information about the book and information about how to get me on social media.
Okay.
But on social media, Instagram is Michelle Fishburne, MichellFishburne, and I'm known as the Happy Nomad.
Wonderful. Michelle, this was delightful. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Michelle. I really enjoyed it.
Follow Asking for a Friend on social media outlets and provide a review and share this show wherever you get your podcasts. Reviews and sharing help us grow.